So the second half of the poem seems to be the second ode. The first ode is the Uptown ode, and now it ends, in fact, more than 50% of it becomes an ode to the Machete. So it begins with that powerful line that I think Connie referred to, allow me to translate. Anna quickly paraphrase that. This is difficult. Allow me to translate. What's being said there?
He's trying to, I see it as both like kind of a connection and sort of a turn from the previous, what we all just did was trying to translate. We were all trying to get home, but now he's going to do that for us, not by literally saying, this is what Willie meant.
Okay. That was a fancy read, and you do that. No, I depend on it. That's why I wake up in the morning, so you can do the fancy reading. But you suggested at the end of what you said, the simpler reading. When somebody says to you, like you've just gone on, and somebody says, "Let me tell you what Kamara is saying. Let me translate." In other words, but it has a tone to it. Anybody help me out? Am I the only one thinking this, Lily?
I think he's very clearly signaling who he expects his audience to be, meaning someone to whom this experience from the first section would not be familiar at all.
Right. So Brother Will has said this to me, and now I turn to you in this ode, and the second ode, and say, I want to explain what this means.
But I actually think it's complicated, and I don't know that it's super clear from reading the second section at first, whether he's translating all of only what Will said, we are all trying to get home, or if he's translating the entire first paragraph, like which part of the first stanza, which part of the first stanza are we supposed to be able to graph onto this second
So
paragraph?
that is a key ambiguity. Am I translating what Will just told me, or am I translating this entire scene, and to do so, I need to go somewhere else? So we don't have time to do a close reading of the whole second section, but I'd like each of you in turn just to say something about what you encounter. In fact, I give you license to say anything you want up until the last section, which is not identified by a stanza break, but it begins when I was young. Let's just not talk about that yet. And I want you to be free to talk about anything else in that long section, which seems to entail a pilgrimage back to where men forge by hand the machetes of the Philippines. So you didn't know I was going to do this, but Connie, you're first. Say anything about this section that you think would be helpful.
Sure. Well, I think one of the first things to notice is that it differs so much from the first section in, tempo, and also in the syntax, I guess. Allow me to translate. There's some sort of implicit didacticism. But then also you have images that come...
And that next line, there are neighborhoods in America. It sounds like a mini lecture.
Right, right. And the images come much more slowly. The ocean, the weeping, the weathers. I really love that part about the equal weathers sort of equating, in a way, monsoon and gossip, both things specific to and important to maybe the Philippines, in that there's... something about a hush and an excitement, and something that's seasonal, and a reason to convene, maybe, which maybe harkens back to the motley flock and the convening that we did in the first section.
Good. And Connie did the nice thing of referring to the passage that's at the beginning of this section, but I invite you to go anywhere you want. Carlos, you want to do it next? What do you have?
Sure. I really sort of like, maybe this is too long of a section to pick, but I like summoning disgruntled angels, and then armed with cutlasses that could teach you to make anything with that simple blade. That comes later, because I like summoning disgruntled angels because it's sort of referencing to the top part, talking about these drunks that are back home and planting a tree so they wouldn't forget your pain. It made me think of the people that you're leaving behind, sort of this split between those who leave the country for whatever reason and those who remain. And maybe summoning disgruntled angels is a comment about drinking as well, but it was funny to me because it's here. He's summoning disgruntled angels. These drunks are kind of like disgruntled angels being summoned. But
yes. And
then these armed with cutlasses, this completely opposite image of almost like the jungle conquistador, or this working
or insurrectionists armed and cutlass, which is a rough synonym for machete.
Yeah.
But cutlass suggests the Spanish armed, or the resistance to Spanish, or
Yeah.
the American armed after 1898,
Yeah.
and or the resistance to it armed with cutlasses. So this is a very traditionally dangerous place.
Yes.
But what happens after the comma is they could teach you to make things, and it turns out one of the things they make is how to cook a hog over a fire.
Yeah.
So it's not just martial and military.
Yeah.
There's something about the machete that is a tool that is not only violent. Yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very because you can use it for so many different things, it becomes a very complex image that both references many different uses and then many different cultures in the poem.
Good. Okay. Let's go over to Lily. Anything to add from this section?
Yeah, I think that to me, what made me sort of think that the second section is actually a translation of the entire first section is the way that these
Which is, by the way, let me pause, a really interesting idea.
Oh, thank you.
No, but I mean, can you say a little more about
Oh,
that?
sure,
What
yeah.
If, what if the second ode?
Thank you.
What if the second ode is a kind of mirror?
Well,
Yeah.
what made me think it, two things. One was he mentions the law of moving bodies, which I thought was like Newton's laws of
Yes, it's
bodies
a pun
in
on
motion.
physics and diaspora.
So
yeah.
I thought like
Right, moving bodies.
famously that a law is for every action there's an equal but opposite reaction. So I thought maybe like he was intending to kind of say, even though he's describing dancing, I
Yes,
thought
he
it was
mentions
kind
the
of
dance floor. Yeah.
an idea of like, here's this section and maybe
Yeah.
presented in this environment, it's got an
Yeah, yeah.
equal but opposite
Yeah.
translation.
Yeah, that's really, really brilliant. I mean, I think the motley flock of the first section is a bunch of Latin, to use a phrase, Latin guys dancing. But the motley flock of the second stanza are the moving bodies of the diaspora, and especially going back home, so that the machete's many meanings and purposes has the same motley quality. Like a Swiss Army knife, it gets to be used for all kinds of things. That the cultural integration of the first part in its celebration of the ritual of male dancing does. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was great.
Oh, thanks.
But now you wanted to say something else.
Oh no, just a quick thing. You had mentioned that like definitely the poem takes a turn with the section you mentioned earlier with when I was young towards the bottom.
Yes.
But I actually, when I was reading it, I marked a turn at "Bless you in your sad secrets, comma, but I." So that's just
the but.
Yeah,
because that's when we actually go to the Philippines.
the "bless you," but I mirrored the "allow me to translate" break to me like.
It's also the first instance we get I think.
Yeah, I think.
Is it the first?
oh, no, well, in the
there's one in the
second
first
section.
section.
In the second, yeah.
I
Yeah.
sound like
Yeah.
a '78 gremlin. That's a 1978 gremlin dragging its tailpipe. What an image!
Right.
An image of sound. Anna, do you want to add something about this second part, the second ode?
Yeah, I love what Lily just said about the whole second section being kind of a translation of the first, because I think that there is something, like there's a real shift to me in kind of like the groundedness of the first section, which has these kind of, it has the objects that we talked about, the artifacts, it has people, it's got names, it has directions, it has like movement that we can sort of anchor, like, okay, they went from here to here. But the second section has like an almost kind of magical, realistic sort of quality to it. We know he's going back to a real place, he's making a pilgrimage, he's looking at the process by which some of these things are made, but there is a kind of, almost a dreamier quality to it.
It's an origin story, right?
Yeah.
To the exact place where, right? And then you have fire and embers and making things. This is the machete, not as a symbol, but as an actual tool. This is where it's forged.
It's like looking at something that's really elemental.
Elemental is the word.
Yeah, sometimes like the elementals, they're sort of the hardest to define.
Fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. Carlos, you look, we're going to turn to Kamara, but you look like you had something to add.
Oh, I just thought that was great. Like, it's such a myth that is being created and enacted. The fire, the making, the feeding, the creating of food, sustaining, and then the coming of age, sort of. When I was young, I thought this, and then now back to the future.
Interesting what it does to translate. This is a kind of in conventional terms, thought of perhaps as a reverse translation. Even though the second section is in English, what's happening is that this American experience of diasporic men getting together to dance can be translated from an original. It can be translated from the mythology of the Machete. Kamara, your thoughts on this second section?
Yeah. So I really like what they were talking about with the mythology, and I wanted to talk about religion and rites and traditions in this passage, because I think like that's the most the biggest like content change for me is that after this first section of kind of like fun and dancing and the like city life of New York City, we get back to this origin story that is rooted in diablos and rites and weeping and black saints and disgruntled angels, which for me says something about like if this part is a translation of this, then there must be something also holy or like devilish in this as well, right?
Yes.
And so I think that's really powerful and beautiful.
So well put. And to add to your the references that they chanted low. There's a chanting and the use of mallets that are presumably forging the machete that are creating quick cut time. They're creating the origins of what becomes the rhythm that Tito Puente and others get to bring to the United States.
Quick cut time and
quick cut time in itself, right? Like what an amazing phrase. So just I'm getting feeling excited about discovering yet again from Patrick Rosal what we know about American music. Let's say from New Orleans, for instance, to take a different mode, which is that all American music is essentially created from the diaspora, from horrific, forced diasporic bodies moving through the Middle Passage and other methods, but also from the essential annexation of the Philippines by the United States, its only colony. Technically, its only colony. I don't think Hawaii quite counts. The Philippines was our colony. We conquered it from the Spanish in 1898, and this is democracy's colonial experience, right? But what happens is you get this rhythm and tradition and religion and rite that happens to American society, and what we do is we get this first American scene, and then we get the origin of it. We get the backstory in a way. Okay, so now let's turn to the last section, which I will read, and I'll invite each of you to say something about. Now we are not in Frank O'Hara's New York anymore, Toto. We are not in that style. We are not in that present tense. And now he's becoming a little more formalistic in creating a triad of what hard is, right? I thought hard was this, I thought hard was that, and in some neighborhoods, hard is. So I'll read it and you can comment on what you think he's doing here. When I was young, I thought hard was the mad dog you could send across a crowded bar. I thought hard was how deep you roll or how nasty the steel you bring. In some neighborhoods of America, hard is turning down the fire just enough so you can kiss the knife and make it ring. Okay. Connie, you want to start? You don't have to do the whole thing because you'll have help from the rest of us.
Yeah, I think the way that this section is set up with the when I was young, I thought, and then the now, in a way, this retranslating of hard sort of forgives the youth, or forgives the youthful definition of what hard is. And
what is the youthful definition of hard?
Just macho, having, like, bearing a weapon, or doing
cutting and knifing and military.
Right. And there's a sense, I think, of tenderness now in the present tense, or even of abiding guilt. I think that speaks to something of the experience of needing to assimilate to what, like, a different kind of masculinity, or what an American kind of masculinity is, and this is sort of revisiting that.
And in a way, he's saying, when I was young, I thought this, and when I was young, I thought that, but now I've learned. So there's a change. Lily, I'm just going to throw you a little curveball and ask you to try to give us some meanings of hard. Here, can you spin off a few?
Yeah, I think hard in this sense of like referring to masculinity, as Connie brought up, means hard as in you have an exterior that doesn't allow you to become vulnerable or
Right.
open to something else.
When I
coming
was
in.
a young man or a boy, we called hard guy. There was a hard guy.
Yeah, like
Some
tough guy. Yeah.
guy,
So hard meaning it can mean hardened against the world,
Mhm.
like you are self-contained and
Good.
strong.
That's one.
Yeah.
Another one?
It can mean unbreakable, like it's hard and maybe you just
Mhm.
can't, as opposed to soft.
Another one?
Stiff, so not malleable.
Yes, and that refers back to the forging of the,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's all about making the metal not hard during the forging so that you can
Right, and
create
then
something that is very hard.
Yeah.
Okay, and there's one more.
Difficult, like
Difficult.
hard to parse.
Yeah, difficult. I thought this was difficult. I thought that was difficult. Okay, thank you, Lily. Kamara, thoughts about this last section?
Whew.
Something good is happening to this speaker, in my opinion. I feel good about what he learns. Hard is, Patrick Rosal helps us with the reading. Hard is turning down the fire. What's he saying?
So I think in part he's saying that, I don't know, fire can symbolize and represent so many different things, but like rage, anger, hardness even, but like turning that down in some sense, turning down that machismo in some sense can bring
The violence, fire as a violence.
Yeah, fire as a violence
Mhm.
can create or like lead to something. I take it as like a musical reference at the end, or like a rhythmic reference at the end, like making a ring,
Making it ring.
Making
like
it ring.
really making it work. Yeah.
making it like a ring can be such like a perfect in tune, everlasting sound.
Yeah.
Who did the ringing of the bells thing?
William Carlos Williams. Ring,
Yeah.
ring.
That
Catholic
sort of
bells.
thing, like an
Yeah.
everlasting
Yes.
sort of sound, and how you do that is not by being the biggest fire in the room.
I think what you learn, or what he learned, what the speaker learns by going back to the very spot in the Philippines where the machetes were forged by hand, is that it's not all about the heat of the fire, the hottest, hardest guy. It's about tempering, that's the word, isn't it?
Yeah.
Tempering heat so that the forging creates a knife that makes food, that can handle fire, that can be peaceful, that is for teaching culture rather than simply chopping people down either through insurrection or defense. And that results in something that you can kiss and make ring. It is not so hot that you can't kiss it. And kissing really takes me back to the first section of that homosociality. There's Willie dapping up Orlando. That's not a hard guy greeting that turns out to be a kind of kissing in a way. Okay,
That's
well,
complicated, right? Like
Yeah.
let's not just like take this thing that we know for one use. Let's give it all of its other uses. I mean, not to like get weirdly personal here, but I went on a trip to Costa Rica where all the guys in my group wanted to bring home machetes. And like leaving aside like who actually wants their kid to come home with a machete, a 17-year-old.
I'm not sure that the airlines would like that too.
Well, yeah, that
But
too. That too.
how did they even get on the plane? But anyway.
Right, but like, but they all wanted it for that use, for like, to go home and like threaten their little brothers with, or like to show, like, look
Right.
what I got,
Right.
like this
I mean,
weapon.
that anecdote is helpful because I think this poem ultimately is about a complicated history of machismo, like complicating it, tempering it, turning down the fire, so that when we see these guys dancing in Spanish Harlem, we think maybe something that is more complicated going on among this male ritualizing. Carlos?
Yeah, I was gonna say much of what everyone has talked
That's
about.
good,
That
man.
it was, yeah, I guess so.
We're in harmony here.
But it's kind of a shift from sort of an enacting into a making. Like instead of using the tool to enact violence or to sort of royal your way across the room like a mad dog, it's a shift towards focusing on the making of that tool and sort of the
Making and
the
teaching
using
culture,
of all these
right?
different of fire and steel and earth and sort of the human coming together to make these things and kind of the connectivity of that making rather than the use.
Terrific. Okay, quick final words. Anything about the poem or about this kind of poetry or maybe what he does with the I do this, I do that, anything at all? Connie, you've had a few seconds to think about what you might add.
Yeah, I think the interesting, excerpting from the, that poetic tradition, but then, changing it so quickly. Even the beginning where you're dancing and then it's not even midnight and you're already tired and you already want to get home, and that sort of section is already cut off and then you have to go somewhere else.
Terrific. Lily, final word?
I think based on the concept of translating and what we talked about before about how it seems to signal that he expects his audience to be one that's not familiar with this particular experience, I think we're kind of, at least I took that to mean he's asking us to, if we see this scene in our own lives, to read this this like complicated journey of masculinity and complicated like diasporic identity in the people that we see, and not to just assume that's just some guys having a night out. Like like what Kamara was saying, there's a rite and a ritual and a something really important to what these guys that you might sort of cast aside or walk by and not think about what they're doing.
There's something very strong in saying at the end, there are some neighborhoods in America in which the guys are not just seeing how nasty the steel that they bring is. There are some neighborhoods, and he begins the second ode with, there are neighborhoods in America. So, he's really making a claim for a complex reading, just as you said. Carlos, final thought, final word?
Sure, I'd just like to say that has such a command of pace. Just like such an incredible command of pace, moving from the first long stanza with very few periods and punctuations, and it just kind of runs through densely together. And then it's tempered again in the second one, sort of shortening itself down into these more declarative sentences that kind of echo off each other, especially the last three, into like a kind of ringing for me that I just thought he did really well.
Sounds like that you as a poet might be learning a thing or two about this.
Yeah, great pace, great pace.
Great. Anna, final thought?
I would say that I am absolutely all for a poetry that seeks to complicate any of these notions of masculinity, diaspora, machetes, any or all of the above. That's what I'm looking for, especially when I'm the audience that needs these things translated for me, because this hasn't been my experience. Like what Lily said, sort of a while back about how maybe that word translates sort of gestures towards the audience of those who haven't had the experience of diaspora in a way, and also in a way I think also to those who have had that immigrant experience and who are kind of cobbling together the origins with the let's go uptown.
Good. We've said it various ways, but it's worth repeating. The next time I see someone named Jibo spinning one ill cut, notice the cut there, because this is about Machete, the cutlass, one ill cut after another, I'm not going to think simply, that's someone I should be afraid of, that's someone who is inherently violent. I'm going to say, well, there's probably a complicated cultural story about this ill cut dance. Kamara, final thought, final word?
Yeah, you almost took the words out of my mouth.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, like, going back to the title, an Uptown ode that ends on an ode to the machete. If you looked at that title without reading the rest of the poem, you'd think this poem would be about like violence and yeah, you would see some relation between New York and someplace else, but you would think violent. But learning about origins and learning about diasporic histories, things like that, you can find some type of peace in that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I could talk about We Are All Trying to Get Home forever.
Do you want to say one more thing about we are all trying to get home? What does that mean to you?
I think it talks a lot about the experience of not only immigrants, but people who don't necessarily know where their original home may be, and know it's not in America. And why I think it's like so beautiful is that it's this like constant process. And even though like the second half seems like a origin story, seems like the beginning, you know that it's not. And like you can't find the beginning of this section where they're actually like making the steel. Like where is that part? So yeah, it's just a constant, consistent process that.
That's thank you. That sets up my final word, which is that the only real violence in the poem that we encounter is the physics of the diaspora, the first and last law of moving bodies. Right? I mean, that's what's happening here. That's what's happened. That's how America, he uses the word America, not United States. That's how America is constituted, the law of moving bodies. And that the best sanctuary for such moving bodies, bodies that have been moved, is the dance floor. That's what he says. That the dance floor is a sanctuary. And that makes me deeply moved by the experience of the first section in retrospect when I reread it. So the book is by Patrick Rosal, R-O-S-A-L, and it's called Brooklyn Antediluvian. And I think everyone at this table is going to buy it as soon as it's available. Thank you very much, all of you.